Well, good morning, friends of Metro Baptist. It is an honor to be with y'all this morning in this place. I have known many people from Metro for years, and I've had the honor of visiting on Sundays, staying upstairs after climbing the 73, I think, or is it 88? I can't remember the name. It's a big number of stairs, and staying up there on a Thanksgiving holiday or in the summer and getting to know the folks who have been blessed by this place. I count myself as one of them. And so it is an honor to share the virtual pulpit with y'all this morning. So a few years ago, FBC DC is the church that I serve here in DC. We hosted Reverend Dr. Brad Braxton for a lectureship. And he lectured on the long-term effects of slavery and white supremacy on American Christianity. Some of y'all might know Dr. Braxton from his time as pastor at the Riverside Church in New York, or others might know him as the former professor at Wake Forest Divinity. Now, he serves as the director for the Center of Studies of African American Religious Life at the National Museum of African American History. If you've not been, I highly recommend going when the time is safe to do so. And during his time with us, Dr. Braxton spoke of a cosmic worship practice of allowing ancestors to tell their stories. He recounted his visit to the Ghanaian coast a few years back, the coast where men and women and children shackled in heavy chains from their feet to their wrists were forced onto ships to be sold into slavery. As they took one last look at the African coastline from one last time, Braxton said he could feel the air, how thick it was and how hot the ground was from the spirit of the ancestors still dwelling in the earth, dwelling for the homeland, yearning for the homeland, and waiting to tell their stories. Waiting to tell their stories. He says that in order to do the work of racial justice and really of anti-racism, he stressed that we must allow for these ancestors to tell their stories. And I pray that we, as we consider ourselves progressive and liberal church, I pray that we hear that and we say a hearty amen to that. Because for far too long, the unresolved trauma of white supremacy has clung tightly to our faith. The gospel and the First Testament have been used as tools of oppression of our Black siblings and of LGBTQ siblings, or really any person who has ever threatened power. And it's easy to separate ourselves from faith groups who so easily other and outcast. But siblings, I say to you that as a Latina who is a product of that background, and while I claim with my whole heart a faith that seeks to liberate, I confess to you this morning that the work of decolonizing my faith, my Christian faith, is onerous and never ending. And just when I think that I get it, I need Jesus to appear to me in the middle of the dark room that I have locked myself away in and proclaim peace. See, passing of the peace, that was a fairly new church practice for me. I didn't grow up doing that in church. At First Mexican Baptist Church in San Antonio, Texas, we would usually sing Family of God, a familiar hymn from the Baptist hymnal. And on the second verse, we'd go around shaking hands as we sang joint heirs in Jesus as we travel the sod. It wasn't until living in Atlanta and attending Northside Drive Baptist Church where I accidentally high-fived a deacon during the passing of the peace that I learned what it was. Johannine scholars and theologians have a lot to say about the event that we just read about that happened behind those locked doors. But I think the real commentary that we should pay attention to here is that of comedian John Mulaney's. He says the first time Jesus appeared and passed the peace, traditionally what we say, right, is when someone says, "Peace of Christ be with you," we traditionally say, "and also with you." And for our Catholic siblings, they now say, "and with your spirit." However, Mulaney says that it makes no sense for the first response to have been, and also with you. He says that it would have been more along the lines of, oh, hey, and you should have some of that too. But let's be honest. I think the first reply ever to Jesus' passing of the peace was probably, peace of Christ. And then the response would have been, it's Jesus! Or a double take in a Jesus Christ! Not so calm and pomp as we think it would have been. You see, Jesus appears to them in a hidden room behind locked doors with the lights out while they hid from the outside world out of fear. And yes, of course, they knew that their teacher had defeated death. And yes, the woman had told them he was alive earlier that day, but they still feared the outside world. And it's easy to give these followers of Jesus grief for time and time again being scared. But let's remember that these people just witnessed the brutal death days before. And within less than a month, they went from celebrating with palm branches and wine to death of their teacher by the hands of the state. And in the days after Jesus' death, they spend their days sitting with grief of losing a beloved friend. In the days after his resurrection, they know he is no longer in the tomb, but where is he? Where is the one who saw the poor and the weak and proclaimed them rich and strong? Because that is not how they feel right now. Right now, they feel helpless and overwhelmed. Right now, in the dark room, locked away, they don't know where that light is. Right now, they feel depleted and anxious, and of course, traumatized from the events of the last week. Friends, I have no doubt that you and I would also want nothing more than to hide away and shut the world out while we cried every last tear, escaping from processing the trauma of death and the reality of empire. But we also know that good news was never meant to be locked up in a dark room. The good news the disciples witnessed could not stay hidden in a tomb, a locked room, or even an upper room, as we will learn. From the time that Jesus called each of them by name to this moment, he has proclaimed shalom, peace, not just for a group in the know, for some life hack privy to a chosen few, but to a world that yearned for hope in the midst of an empire that ruled half the known world. Because like Dr. Braxton reminded us a few years ago, to ignore the trauma of a colonized faith is to continue the cycle of hate and fear. To be a person of good news faith is to be informed of the trauma of the early followers and to seek to replace violence with peace, to strive for the peace to fill each and every crack that's been created by empire or institution. A church that has caused siblings to be deemed not good. Good news calls us to fill those cracks and call it good. The disciples shut themselves off from the world out of fear, but the locked doors could not keep Jesus from coming in and appearing in the middle of them, sending them out to proclaim that peace that they knew. He appears to them in the midst of their shock and amazement, and he proclaims peace for all. Then he disappears. Kind of annoying how he does that. And of course, Thomas arrives because he wasn't there when it happened. And he's upset. For the second time, he has missed Jesus. He missed seeing his beloved friend and teacher. And can you imagine the frustration, the anger, the deep sadness, and yes, probably some doubt? Surrounded by your friends and colleagues who have seen it all and who get to say, oh yeah, no, like I just totally just saw him. Oh, you must have missed him because you weren't here. And there you are, Thomas, formerly known as Didymus, which by the way, from the Greek just means the twin. And so now his whole life just known as the twin, but Now he has a name given to him by his beloved friend. And now again, he feels left and locked out of the room where Jesus appeared. And so, out of trauma and weariness from the last few days, Thomas just doesn't go, oh, well, or better luck next time. No, no. See, Thomas is the one who knows the law. He has heard the cries from the Psalms from the time he was a child, remembers the stories of his ancestor Joseph, and knows his teacher. And he says, no, I need to see the scars and the wounds that they gave him myself, because I need to see him too. And so Jesus appears to his beloved friend, shows him the wounds, and calls him by name to his side. The one who saw him as more than just the twin does not chastise him, but invites him in, beckons him to feel and believe. Jesus does not focus on Thomas's doubt, but on the invitation to Thomas to believe in a way that Thomas needed. Jesus, you see, is this trauma-informed liberator who seeks to find us in the dark places or wherever it is that we find ourselves. He meets us there and proclaims peace to us. Jesus allows the disciples to see and to feel the scars in his flesh, perhaps not as proof of what he did, but as a reminder that he was in fact the human one who defeated death, and that it doesn't mean he is free of the scars. And in the days after the pomp and the pageantry of Easter Sunday, after we've sung Christ the Lord is risen today, and after we've removed the wilted flowers from the flowered cross, and after we've summoned the Easter lilies outside because our sinuses can no longer handle the pollen, and after the peeps at Target have now been moved to the clearance bin, the shine of Easter Sunday has worn off, and now we are left with the realities of now. Today, post-Easter Sunday, we can see the light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, but just barely, as our friends and we share our COVID vaccine cards, and as we slowly get to see our friends in real life. And after over a year of quarantining and elbow bumping and masks and meticulous hand washing and distancing, we too, in a way, bear our own mental and emotional scars of a hard, hard season. As we've had more time to sit and absorb the brutalities of racism and Christian nationalism, and see the cracks in our own systems, all while cooped up and locked up in walls of our apartments and living spaces. Friends, we too need a Mark Jesus to show up proclaiming peace. A peace that fills every part of our hearts, withered away by the weight of the hard year, inviting us to name the wounds we share and live a faith not marked as bad for doubting, but seen as whole for asking Jesus to meet us where we are. I think back to Dr. Braxton's challenge from 3 years ago, asking us, what would it be like to have a faith informed by the ancestors? My guess is that it would mean the sincere move toward confession of racism and a recognition of the real harm that the church has been to vulnerable siblings. In today's lectionary passage, the main character also reminds us that the good news has to be accessible to people of different abilities and understandings. And Thomas is our reminder that doubt does not push us away from God. Doubt does not make us weaker siblings or weaker Christians. In fact, it brings us closer to an understanding of the character of an all-loving, liberating God. And thanks be for a liberator who does not condemn us when we question, but rather calls us in and asks us to partner to work in this liberation. I think that's why on Easter, on Easter morning, the pastor says, Christ is risen, and we respond with, He is risen indeed. See, we say it twice to remind us that the divine one, the human one, conquered evil and liberates us with love and peace. We say it twice to invite you and me, skeptics and saints and sinners, to stand in light and be peace. The peace instilled in you and me, friends, cannot be contained. Who you are, known by name, by God, cannot and must not hide. The days of Easter reminds us all that we each have an Easter story to share. The questions, the joy, the grief, the sorrow, the demands, all of it counted as peace. And so, siblings, peace be with you.